Hey everyone, welcome to Make It Meta. Today I am joined by Caleb, aka Spizer64. My name is Temujin. I'll be the host today. And today we're talking about something pretty spicy. You have a little achievement to talk to us about. You have a new little deck that came out to talk to us about. And yeah, how about you just start off by telling us about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Caleb, otherwise known as Spicer, as Temu said. I am I'm relatively new cEDH player. I started playing back in fall of last year,
Okay.
on a very paradoxically different than the deck that we will be talking about, the Elevir cEDH deck. So I started a whole Discord from the ground up, built it. We have like 500 people now in that Discord,
Hell
and
yeah.
that's where
Okay.
and yeah, and I actually started brewing this deck in there. Originally, got some ideas, started rolling around in there, and then just used my ideas, took it to chaos, and did pretty well.
Okay. All right. You did pretty well. Well, what deck did you do pretty well with?
Yeah, so the new deck that me, Mage, and Temu all kind of worked on a little bit together, is Marchesa, Dealer of Death. It's a new Grixis deck from Outlaws of Thunder Junction that is kind of a mix of a turbo slash mid rangey Grixis deck that is pretty good at generating value with the commander, more so than I think that people would like to give her credit for, and it worked really well for me. So that's what we'll be talking about.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, tell me how this tournament went and some of the highs and lows and what you were impressed with bringing the deck into the tournament meta.
Yeah, so this being like my fourth or so like online tournament, I literally have never played in an in-person tournament before. I've only done online ones before. So this is like the fourth tournament or so that I've ever done. Um and throughout the tournament the deck did pretty well at every stage of the game, which is something that I was
Okay.
kind of impressed with from a Grixis deck specifically. Normally Grixis decks, at least in my experience, tend to be very good in the early game at putting wins on the stack quickly, and pushing through a win attempt very quickly, like through with a dockside or what have you, or early wheel. Um, but they sometimes tend to struggle in the late game whenever decks like Blue Farm and Kinnan have their very large advantage engines planted, and then you just can't keep up.
Yeah,
Um,
for sure.
but I didn't really have too much of that experience. There was a couple games where it still felt like that because this deck definitely straddles the line between turbo and mid range. So it's obviously not going to be good or not exceptional at either one of those. But it's has a very nice niche in between. Um, Overall, the deck. I think my favorite parts of the deck was just being able to win with only creatures, which is not
Okay.
something you typically expect from a Grixis deck.
Absolutely not.
Um,
No.
yeah, so one of this deck's main win lines, and we'll talk about it going forward, and I won, I think, two of my games with this loop, is Baron Dockside loops. So normally,
Okay.
Baron Dockside
Okay.
loops are great for generating infinite mana, but unless you have an infinite mana outlet in the command zone, like Thrasios, for example, they don't really do too much. And a lot of Thrasios decks, I don't play Thrasios decks that often, but they don't even run Baron Dockside loops most of the time because they're just less efficient than Temur Sabertooth or any of the other ones.
Yeah.
But in this deck with Marchesa, if there's a single creature on the board that you don't own, you can draw half your deck by just holding priority and just infinitely doing that. And so that makes that combo a very compact two card combo with a commander that is very effective. If the dock, although the dockside count only needs to be six, which is not super high.
It happens a
Um,
lot. Also, very
yeah,
notable. You're already tutoring for Dockside like 50% of your games, anyways, if not more. So
exactly.
like,
Exactly. It's already Dockside's already a good card. Baron's a mediocre card, but you actually can just use it for value if you need to. So
yeah.
not the greatest way to do it, but if you're desperate, you can do that as well. And then the other creature in the deck that doesn't see a lot of play in Grixis decks specifically, except maybe like Tevesh Krom, I think,
Yeah.
is Hullbreaker Horror. Um, and that is another big top end card that most Grixis deck run ad naus, and you can't really do both of those things at the same time. I mean, you
It's a no
can,
no.
but it's very risky. um, so, but Hullbreaker Horror alone, just by itself, is enough to just storm off with Marchesa. all you have to do is make infinite mana, blinking your rocks or blinking your dockside, what have you. And then after that, every single spell that you cast can blink something else, get you a Marchesa trigger, get you an extra card in your
Yeah.
hand, and you could just storm off manually through with Hullbreaker Horror. It's honestly very similar in that case. Like, though, I actually got the Hullbreaker Horror idea whenever I was making the deck from Talion, because they use it kind of as a win con. And
Yeah.
I was like, well, that card seems pretty good with Marchesa, so let's throw
Yeah.
it in the deck. And it turned out to work really
That's good. That's
good.
good.
The only times I think that the deck struggled during the tournament was whenever the board got really bogged down by a bunch of life drain effects. In my first game versus a certain person sitting here, there was 3 Talions on the board at one point, and I just couldn't cast any spells, or I would just instantly die. And that happened in another game as well, where there was 2 Sholdreds out as well. And while this deck does do a pretty good job of avoiding drawing cards with cards like, and we'll talk more about them, there's certain cards in the deck that basically just get you a bunch of Marchesa triggers, which doesn't actually draw cards.
Yeah.
So it can avoid those kinds of effects. It still was enough to just tax the hell out of me in terms of life totals, so that I couldn't really do anything. Yeah. That game, I secured a draw instead of a loss, though. So that was good.
Yeah.
I'll take a draw in that specific instance.
For sure.
And I think the last thing I kind of want to talk about from the tournament is that this deck recovers very well in terms of getting blown out early, unlike a Rogsai deck does. If a Rogsai puts, like, for example, in my finals pod, in literally the last game of the tournament, I put a turn 2 One Ring on the stack, or it was a turn 3 One Ring because a Blind Obedience came down, and it got mana drained, and I was like, cool, I'm gonna be basically doing nothing for 3 turns, but then I top decked an Orcish Bowmaster, and I was immediately right back in the game. Because Marchesa just let me filter all my extra mana that I had, and I had just 4 mana sitting around from casting the One Ring. Now, every single time someone draws an extra card off of a Ristic Study or a fish or anything like that, I was pinging someone and drawing a card. And that helped, that it really quickly helps you get back in the game very quickly if you do get blown out early game, or if someone's like being responsible with a Ristic Study that you have on the field, you can just be like, okay, cool, here's another card, I'm going to be drawing cards off of it, regardless of what you do. So that's kind of one of the strengths of Marchesa, is that in locked up board states where people are being responsible, or that no one's really has anything on the board, you can break parity pretty well. And I'll talk about a funny card that I just added into the deck that helps with that as well.
Okay. Well, I would like to take a second. When I look at decks, right, one of the biggest things that I like to see is a commander that takes an already good card, such as Orcish Bowmasters, Jessica's Will, blah blah blah, and makes them even better. Right? We don't necessarily want to take bad cards and make them good because of the commander. This commander already does that, but it takes, as we'll talk about later, it takes very cheap CMC and easily castable cards and then makes them good. But specifically with Orcish Bowmasters, Jessica's Will, and I'm sure there's quite a few others, it takes them and it just makes them absolutely amazing with your commander. And when I'm looking for a commander, I look for those types of things, because making the good cards better just seems fucking good, right? Like, so that's something I'm very impressed with playing against the deck, is seeing the good cards be better. Definitely a very big plus for it.
For sure.
Now, I would like to take a second. You talked about, playing Elevere, right? That's what you started with. You're new to CDH. What was your, how did you feel about transferring from a stacks mindset, and how is your growth from being in a stacks mindset to going to a semi-turbo, semi-mid-range Grixis plan, right?
Yeah, I think it really helped me, along with some pointers from you and Mage, especially about timing windows. Because in a stacks deck, you're always trying to slow the table down, trip people up, and extend the game, right? In this deck, you're looking to seize a window at whatever opportunity it presents itself. And there's a lot of ways to do that. In Elevere, the problem that I was having with it is that it was just so difficult to be able to control all three players at the same time with stack pieces. It's still easy to do. Like land a Null Rod, land a Stony
Yeah.
Silence, land a Collector Oof. You're going to be able to shut off most of the table. But then there's decks like cedh that don't really care about that if they have a Bloom Tender on the field.
Yep.
So then you need another stacks piece to deal with them.
All it takes is that one good deck to get under that one stacks piece or that one piece of the removal that you can't interact with, and no one else wants to interact with it, right? Like everyone else wants it gone. So
yeah, so I mean, I'm trying to tailor Elevir. I'm still working on the deck to help it work well or work better in that kind of situation. It's just I wanted to take a flip side and run a more proactive deck, and I think playing a stacks deck did help me with that because I know where the interaction points are. I know when people are usually going to try and win and like the best way to stop them, and so at least from a stacks point of view. So I think it did help me with that, but running good cards just felt good.
Yeah.
Fun fact.
I'm really glad to hear that, and you had a really good top 4 with it. So that's very impressive, especially with you being new. That's awesome, dude. Now on this part, I think I'm just gonna let you take the reins. Let's talk about some of the cards that you are most excited about, or that you feel are really good in the deck, or that had a really high yield in your tournament.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start off with the 2 cards that are basically in this deck for a very specific reason, and that is Hex Parasite and Spellskite. Those 2 cards by themselves, Hex Parasite especially, and Spellskite in another game, both carried their weight more than any other card in the deck, I think. Besides, of course, Dockside. Dockside's just broken, but we all know.
Fair enough. Won't fight you on that one.
yeah. I mean, Dockside carries its weight because it's Dockside. no need to comment on that one. But Hex Parasite and Spellskite both are basically Necropotence at home, but slightly better. In terms of you have to pay 2 life, and you get to look at 2 cards, keep one of them, and pitch one of them with the Marchesa trigger. Spellskite is a tiny bit worse and better than Hex Parasite. It's worse because you have to wait for someone to put something on the stack before you can use it, whether that be an ability or a spell. Notably, you can target any spell or any ability. It does not have to be a legal target, or like you can do it on a Toxic Deluge, for example. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
So that's the spell, and so Spellskite has a little bit of extra utility because it shuts down some untap combos. So, for example, I went up against an Alundo player in one of my rounds, and that card turned off their 1,000-year elixir, and it was hilarious.
Oh, that's fucked.
Yeah. So, and there's a lot of actually things that like target things that Spellskite is a very good way to stop. Like cedh untap combos don't really work well through a Spellskite.
Yeah.
And it just serves like it as an extra protection piece on the board as well. If someone's trying to remove a stacks piece, you can redirect it to Spellskite and prevent it from being taken off the board, at least for a little bit.
Quick question: is there any niche interactions that Hex Parasite has that might be worth noting?
Yeah, there's all sorts of fun things. Probably the most relevant one is that you can always make your Mystic Remora cost 2 mana to keep around. You will never have to pay more than 2 because you can remove the counter that it would have from it and take it back down to 0. Then it'll tick back up to 1. So you just assuming that your fish is on 1 whenever you play the Hex Parasite.
Okay.
So that's a fun little interaction. You can also just nuke Planeswalkers and other random things like Gemstone Caverns and what else? What others weird things? Urza's Saga, stuff like that.
So you can interact with a cedh player's Teferi, hypothetically.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, you could kill a Teferi if you have enough mana.
Yeah, okay. I like that. Hating on cedh players.
Yeah. There's not a lot of pieces in this deck to hate on cedh, but that is technically one of them. But
fair enough.
Yeah, Hex Parasite alone just being 1 mana and tutorable off of stuff like Imperial Recruiter and just a really cheap thing to tutor that gets you cards if you have extra mana has proved very relevant in the tournament, and that card will not be coming out of the deck anytime soon.
Hell yeah. Okay. All right. I like that.
Other notable cards. I'm trying out Malevolent Hermit. I don't know if it's good enough yet. It's just kind of like a defense grid effect on the back, and you can bend it to a Marchesa trigger, which seems pretty good.
Yeah. Valid.
and it does a Marchesa trigger on the front side, so like seemed decent.
Sure does.
What else? What else? Displacer Kitten. This is not a combo Displacer Kitten deck. However, it does. This is if you cast a spell and you can blink a rock, you then can pay for a Marchesa trigger. So it's kind of busted in this deck.
So Displacer Kitten, you can store your mana up with your, whatever counter spells you're doing, and then, or on your turn, pass the turn, and you got like stored up Marchesa triggers, and then I guess Bergie does the same thing, yeah? Except
Bergie does the exact same thing. Yep.
Not as cool, not as cool.
Yeah, not quite as broken because you can't blink a dockside with it, but it's still pretty good. Both of them are very good. Like play those cards, pass the turn, untap and win cards.
Oh, that's awesome! I love that.
Yeah, if I play Displacer Kitten and it gets back to my turn, I'm probably winning the game most of the time, unless my hand is just ass. But
I mean, it happens.
Yeah, but that's pretty much it. The rest of the creatures are pretty standard.
Standard creatures.
Baron is probably the only other one, but I already talked about Baron, so
yeah, Baron Dockside.
Just one card combo with a Dockside.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like it.
For the sorceries, we're running a light reanimation package, so I'm running reanimate and animate dead in the enchantment slots because we're binning things with Marchesa. So if we have a reanimate or a way to tutor reanimate to our hand, we can bin a Hullbreaker Horror or bin our Dockside and then reanimate it, and that's pretty good.
Yeah, I like that. Okay. All right.
Yeah, binning a Hullbreaker Horror or a Kitten and reanimating it is definitely a way to win games pretty easily.
Yeah, and you reanimate can also trigger your commander, yeah? If you target somebody else's card in their graveyard?
That is also correct. Yep. So they have additional utility with that as well. If someone has like a Corville player sack their Dockside but then didn't have a reanimation effect for it, you can steal it out of their graveyard.
Yeah.
And get a Marchesa trigger.
What I said earlier about making those good cards better, we got our reanimate, our Jessica's Will, Praetor's Grass, getting triggers off of it. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's a lot of situations where like you just need that one extra card or that one extra land, and you paying that 1 mana to get that card right then and there is very powerful.
Yeah, for sure. I like that. All right, on to our instant package. It looks pretty standard to me.
Yeah, it's pretty standard. The only one kind of outlier I think is probably Cabal Ritual because we're not running Adnos. But we are running Necropotence, so it's basically just for Necropotence and then just extra mana on our combo turns.
Yeah, okay. And your commander's been in a lot of cards, so you're really going to have that threshold a lot of the time.
Yeah, threshold is very easy to achieve in this deck, so it's not really... Threshold's like almost always online if the game is going past turn 3 or 4.
Okay, I like that. Artifacts, again, looks pretty standard. I don't see anything out of the ordinary.
Yeah, I'm on the full talisman package because the deck is hungry for mana. That's kind of the only thing. That's kind of some Grixis decks don't run every single talisman, but I'm on every single talisman. Basically, every rock that you can run, I'm running.
Well, if you want mana, rocks are a good step.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got our basic enchantments. You talked about the Animate Dead. Also can trigger your commander, I believe.
Yep.
And then Necropotence happens to be a pretty alright card in tandem with our Final Fortune and our Born Upon the Wind.
Yep.
Pretty standard Grixis.
Yeah. It's just too good of a card to pass up. It's just so good. A turn 1 Necropotence will usually win you the game if people aren't respecting you.
Yeah, absolutely fair. And now I believe there were a couple spicy includes in the land section.
Yes. We actually get quite a few couple spicy lands in here. So, in terms of the mana fixing, it's no basics in the deck. We need every single colored pip that we can get. The most spicy lands are definitely Cabal Ritual, Forbidden Orchard, Minamo, and then Urborg's not in this one, but I'll talk about those ones first. So Cabal Pit, again, thresholds active very easily. Yeah. Killing Grand Abolishers is very relevant. So yeah, that's why that's in here. It also triggers our commander.
Woo!
Yep.
Okay.
It also triggers our commander.
Yeah.
The best land I think in the deck is Forbidden Orchard.
Okay.
because we don't really care about giving people creatures. We're not a Tymna deck. We don't really care if people have creatures rather. And I mean, yeah, they can beat us up with 1/1 spirits, but that's a lot of spirits they have to get before it really does any meaningful damage to us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, but notably, triggers Marchesa.
Yeah.
So you can just literally just I've kept hands where it's just like like a kept fours that's just like a turn 2 commander with a Forbidden Orchard, and that is basically that's a very keepable 4 because that's going to draw me an extra card every single turn cycle going forwards. At whatever speed I want. If I need it right then on my main phase, I can do it, and if I want to hold it up for instant speed to try and dig for interaction when I need it, I can do that too.
Yeah, see, and this goes right back to making good cards better. One of the most important things to me, like beyond making like cards good, right, is the consistency of the deck. So if you can take your land base and keep the card that's already adding the consistency of your deck and just add more consistency because your commander makes it good, like that's kind of crazy. I like
It's
that.
pretty gas. Pretty gas. Manamo is because we're on one ring, but notably, if we're in a pinch, we can use it to untap other things.
Yeah,
Um, Notably, they do not have to be legendary. It just doesn't work, I believe. It's kind of expensive to do it,
yeah,
but again, it is an option
yeah, for sure.
to get more Marchesa triggers. And I mean, obviously, untapping one ring is busted as fuck. So
It's definitely a step in the right direction and for winning the game.
yeah, yeah.
um,
Last two spicy lands are Ottawara and Undercity Sewers, I believe. Yeah. So Ottawara, again, all Grixis decks are going to be running this card. It's a uncounterable removal spell that also triggers our commander. So
yeah,
pretty good. And then Undercity Sewers, this card is actually I've actually tutored for this card a lot. If you
okay,
just have like a hand that like you're just gonna have an extra mana that you don't need really to use with a fetch, you can just go get an Undercity Sewers and you can look at the top card and again bin it. And we're running many different ways to utilize our graveyard, so it can help with that a lot as well.
that's fair. I've definitely seen a lot of people running these lands, being really high on them. I understand there was like a Roxay list that was on like 24 lands or whatever that won a tournament recently that was running one of these, which is kind of crazy. I'm not. I hate inconsistencies, so like running tap lands is just irks me, and I'm very skeptical of them. But I understand that people really like them, and they're going to continue to use them. So I'm going to keep my eye out on them for sure.
Yep. And so now I think that's basically everything for the deck itself, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So a couple of the cards that I thought were weak and that I want to swap out, and so my sideboard here does two of the cards that I just put in. So two of the cards that I will, or actually has three of them. So the three cards I'm swapping in currently for testing is Urborg, the Tower of Cirth Ungol, which
Okay,
is I'm just checking that in over the blue black battle bond land. I don't remember what the name of it is. I think Morphic Pool. I think
that would be
right.
correct.
Yeah. So again, just getting the blue mana is important, but I wasn't having too many situations where like that screwed me over. Because the most important colors for this deck early game are blue and black for the
Yep.
early game tutors, and early game like rituals like dark ritual, and cabal ritual. And this is another way to trigger our commander in the late game. And you just have to pay basically 2 mana, this land and one other source for the Marchesa trigger. So
Yeah, seems
I put
legit.
it back in the deck because I liked it.
It's fair. It's fair.
Um, the other card that I'm putting in is Chains of Mephistopheles, so which is probably the spiciest card that's going to be in the deck for sure. um,
Okay.
so I'm swapping this card for Talion, um, which might seem a little crazy, but this deck, what the games that it struggled in the tournament was the games where there was 3 or more card advantage engines on the board and none of them were being respected.
Okay.
Because usually our card draw from Marchesa just can't quite keep up with that, just because
Yeah.
we're like, yeah, if you have a Ristic study, you can probably keep up with it just fine. But the card quality, whenever like against a blue farm deck that has those silence effects that we just don't have access to,
Yeah.
um, is gonna give them an edge most of the time.
Absolutely.
Um, and in the late game especially.
Yeah.
So this card is a way to even the playing field. It does kind of put the onus on us to interact with the game-winning pieces. But when every single one of our interaction spells refunds itself if you have enough mana and no one else is drawing cards. This card, I think, is very well positioned in the current everyone plays a Ristic Study or Draw Engine on turn 1 or 2 and passes. I think it's going to be really good at shutting those decks down.
Absolutely. I think that is a very fair assessment. I definitely look forward to hearing how your experiences with this card. I'm a little skeptical on it because I really hate to, hurt my own thing. That's also the best thing in the format, which is playing your fish and heuristic. But I understand it does a thing and your commander breaks parity. So as long as you have enough of those overlapping synergies, I definitely see where this is just an absolute silver bullet to half the fucking format. I like it.
Yeah. There's just one of the things that I loved from my elevator deck is like if you play one card, the effectiveness of it, if it shuts down all 3 other players, the effectiveness of a collector oof effect is worth like 10 mana for 2 mana. And this is going to have kind of the same effect, but instead of hurting mana production, it's going to hurt the card production. So
yeah,
that's kind of the idea behind it.
That's fair.
And then the last card I'm slotting in is Subtlety.
Okay.
I lost a lot of games to docksides and creatures that I couldn't counter. Early
fair.
game before I was set up. So I'm cutting one of the I can't remember. I think I'm cutting Pyroblast for it.
Okay.
Just to have another free interactive spell that if someone casts a very early thing that I don't really want to deal with or don't want to let resolve, that Subtlety is going to be a nice answer to those.
Yeah, that's fair. Subtlety. I've actually picked up Subtlety myself. In a lot of decks, been testing it a lot more, and I have been sincerely super impressed by this card. Just being able to hit those docksides and those Grand Abolishers, or whatever interaction, creatures that end up getting played. I've had somebody play a turn 1 Crom off of a Jewel Lotus and whatnot, and a Lotus Petal, and I was like, Subtlety, and now they're basically out of the game. It at least hurt them a lot. I don't remember them actually getting away with that game, which Crom usually produces a lot of cards, so that was pretty cool. But I like that card.
Yep, just in there to really stop those early big plays, like being able to just put an Atraxa back on top of somebody's deck that is a creature, that's going to be very difficult to counter. Is like insanely good. It's just such a good tempo card that can also stop win conditions. So it's checks a lot of boxes that I wanted to check in this deck.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's very valid. Okay. All right. Yeah, I think I like this deck a lot. I think it has a lot of potential for sure. One results is one result. I look forward to seeing more results in the future. However, as we have an audience here, if you have any recommendations for new players entering this deck, what would you tell them?
The thing that I struggled with the most, especially when starting out with this deck, is picking the correct window.
Okay.
This deck is very able to pivot back and forth between going for a fast win whenever you think that shields are down versus waiting and generating a bunch of resources before you can go and push through a win attempt.
Okay.
This deck is especially well suited to just wait for someone to put a win attempt on the stack, have someone else interact with it, and then you untap and win. That happened in a bunch of my games. I think most notably the most clutch one that I did was that there was a huge stack battle. There was like a dockside cast, and then they were trying to blink the dockside, and we were able to stop the person.
Yeah.
And there was 2 minutes left in round, and then they passed to me, and I just slammed down a Hullbreaker Horror and won the game basically instantly. So
Hell yeah. Okay.
Yeah, just being able to pick those windows and make sure that you are patient and don't, because if you shoot your win attempt too early, then you'll get punished for it, and then you have a much lower chance of winning that game.
Absolutely, I think that's solid advice to people joining this new deck. I think it has a lot of potential to be explored. Does a very powerful thing, drawing cards. Very powerful thing. Believe it or not, card advantage wins games. But yeah, I would like to thank you for coming here and explaining to us your experience with this deck, how you feel about it, and giving us a little insider scoop on it. Truly, thank you for coming on, and thank you to all the viewers for watching this. As always, the deck list will be down below. If you guys have any questions, please leave a comment down below. Let us know what you think about this deck. Let us know how you feel if you end up playing it. And yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Thanks for having me.